It almost ended for me. I want to tell you about the week of my 28th birthday. A week that nearly ended everything for me. My life had always been a battle with depression and anxiety. It was like carrying a weight that no one else could see, a shadow that followed me everywhere. It pushed people away, even those I loved the most. But for a while, I thought I had finally found a way to outrun it. I had proposed to the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. We had just moved into our own place, and I had a decent job in construction. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real, something stable. But all it takes is one bad day to tear it all down. The morning it started, I woke up feeling hollow, the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones and makes every movement feel like a chore. I dragged myself to work before the sun even rose, the cold air biting at my skin. My boss, a man who seemed to thrive on making everyone miserable, was on my case from the moment I arrived. Every nail I hammered, every board I cut, he found something to criticize. "You call that straight?" he sneered after I laid down a beam. A toddler could do better. The other guys on the crew weren't much help either. Most of them were addicts or alcoholics, barely functional, but somehow still collecting the same paycheck as me. I tried to ignore it all, to just get through the day, but it was like the universe was conspiring against me. During lunch, I walked out to my truck, hoping for a moment of peace, only to find one of my coworkers, a guy who reeked of booze and desperation, rummaging through my things. I snapped. I yanked him out of the truck, ready to teach him a lesson. But before I could even swing, my boss was on me. Turns out, the junkie was his son. "You lay a hand on him again, and I'll have you arrested," he growled, shoving me to the ground. No one cared that the guy had been stealing from me. No one cared about my side of the story. I was just the sorry millennial who couldn't take a joke. I walked off the job that day and didn't look back. I told myself it didn't matter. I could find another job, another way to make ends meet. But when I got home, the bad news kept coming. My fiancée, Emily, was gone. All that was left was a note on the kitchen table. "You're not the person I used to know." 7 words, and just like that, the life I thought I was building crumbled. I sat on the couch, staring at that note, feeling like the walls were closing in. The weight I'd been carrying for so long suddenly felt unbearable. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just felt empty, like there was nothing left to hold on to. I grabbed the pistol my dad had given me years ago, a family heirloom I'd never even fired, and got in my truck. I didn't know where I was going at first, but my hands seemed to steer on their own. I ended up at a place called Blackwater Bluff, a spot known for 2 things: its stunning view of the river and its reputation as a place where people went to end their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat on the edge of the cliff, the moon reflecting off the water below, and let myself feel the weight of everything. The loneliness, the failure, the hopelessness. I thought about Emily, about how I'd let her down. I thought about my dad, who'd always told me to toughen up. I thought about all the times I'd tried to reach out, only to be met with silence or pity. I closed my eyes, the gun in my hand, and took a deep breath. This was it. No more pain, no more pretending. But then I heard footsteps. I opened my eyes to see a man sitting next to me. He was thin, his clothes ragged and dirty, like he'd been living on the streets for years. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but he was smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that made my skin crawl. "Nice night, huh?" he said, his voice raspy but cheerful, like we were old friends catching up. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him, my grip tightening on the gun. "So," he continued, still smiling, "are we doing this?" "Doing what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Don't play dumb, kid. People only come out here for one reason." I stood up, suddenly feeling like I needed to get as far away from this guy as possible. But before I could take a step, he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into my skin. "Relax, kid," he said, his smile never wavering. "I know what I'm doing." The other 7 looked so happy when it was over. My blood ran cold. I jerked my arm free and started running, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, I could hear him laughing, his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he chased me. "Come on, kid," he called out. "You want to die anyway. I'm just trying to help." I didn't look back. I just ran. my lungs burning, my legs aching. When I finally reached my truck, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him standing there, still smiling, still watching me. But then he raised his hand, and I saw the glint of metal. It was my dad's gun. He must have taken it when he grabbed me. The first shot rang out, shattering the silence. I ducked, my heart racing, as another shot hit the side of my truck. I didn't think. I just slammed my foot on the gas and sped away, the sound of his laughter echoing in my ears. I didn't stop until I was miles away, my hands still shaking as I pulled over on the side of the highway. I sat there for what felt like hours, crying, screaming, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I had gone to that cliff, ready to end my life, but in that moment, all I wanted was to live. It took time, but I eventually picked up the pieces. Emily and I reconciled after a lot of hard conversations and even harder truths. We started going to counseling, learning how to communicate, how to really see each other. I found another job, one where I wasn't treated like garbage. And slowly, I started to rebuild. But I still think about that night, about the man on the cliff, about the 7 people he mentioned, people who, like me, had gone there looking for an end but found something far worse. I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for the next lost soul to cross his path. And I wonder if, in some twisted way, he saved my life that night. Because sometimes it takes staring into the abyss to realize how much you want to live. My wife and the illegal syringe. I was 23 years old when the world stopped feeling real. The days blurred together in a monotonous haze, each one indistinguishable from the last. My job at Nova Nutricorp, a sprawling food production facility, was a soul-crushing routine of monitoring vats of synthetic nutrients and ensuring the machines didn't malfunction. The air always smelled faintly of chemicals, a sterile, metallic tang that clung to my clothes and skin, no matter how many times I washed. The city outside was a labyrinth of gray towers, their windows reflecting the pale glow of artificial lights that never dimmed. Life was a flatline, a numb existence where emotions were rationed like everything else. My wife, Elena, worked in biowaste disposal, a job that required her to handle the remnants of the city's medical experiments and discarded biological matter. She came home every night with a haunted look in her eyes, her hands scrubbed raw from the decontamination showers. We rarely spoke about our days. What was there to say? We were cogs in a machine, our lives dictated by the central authority's endless regulations. But one night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, when Elena burst through the door. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. In her hands, she clutched a small, unmarked vial filled with a viscous, amber liquid. 2 syringes glinted in the dim light. "Lucas," she said, her voice trembling with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, "you have to try this." I sat up, my heart pounding. "What is it?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. The rumors had been circulating for months, whispers of a substance that could make you feel something real, something raw and unfiltered. It was called Euphora, and it was strictly forbidden. "It's the real thing," Elena whispered, her fingers trembling as she uncapped the vial. "Not that synthetic garbage they pump into our food. This is pure." I hesitated. The penalties for possession of Euphora were severe, exile to the outer zones or worse. But the look in Elena's eyes was intoxicating. For the first time in years, she looked alive. "Where did you get it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then said, "From Director Vera. He uses it at his private gatherings. Sometimes a vial goes missing." The name sent a chill down my spine. Director Vera was one of the most powerful men in the city, a shadowy figure who controlled the distribution of synthetic neurotransmitters. If he was involved, this was more dangerous than I could imagine. But Elena was already filling the syringe, the amber liquid glinting like liquid gold. She held it out to me, her hand steady now. "Trust me," she said, "you've never felt anything like this." I rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. The needle slid in with a sharp sting, and then the world exploded. It was like being struck by lightning. Every nerve in my body came alive, singing with a euphoria so intense it was almost painful. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. I clutched my chest, laughing uncontrollably as waves of joy crashed over me. Elena was laughing too, her eyes sparkling with tears. We danced around our tiny apartment, our movements wild and uncoordinated, like children discovering the world for the first time. For hours, we talked, really talked, about everything we had buried deep inside. Our dreams, our fears, the life we had lost to the monotony of the city. It was as if the walls we had built around ourselves had crumbled, leaving us raw and exposed, but more alive than we had ever been. When we finally collapsed into bed, our bodies entwined, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. But as I drifted off to sleep, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. This was too good to last. The next night, we did it again, and the night after that. It became our secret ritual, a way to escape the suffocating grip of the city. But soon, it wasn't enough. I needed more of the euphoria, more of the feeling that I was finally alive. Elena tried to warn me, her voice tinged with fear as she watched me inject the third dose. "Lucas, you're going too far," she said, her hand on my arm. "This stuff, it's not safe. We need to stop." But I couldn't stop. The thought of returning to the numbness was unbearable. I promised her I would slow down, but as soon as she fell asleep, I slipped out of the apartment and into the night. The city was eerily quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional patrol drone. I moved like a shadow, my heart pounding as I approached Director Vera's mansion. It was a towering structure of glass and steel, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. But I had spent weeks planning this, studying the patrol patterns and memorizing the layout of the house. I found an unlocked window on the second floor and slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something metallic and sharp. My hands trembled as I crept through the darkened halls, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. I found him in his bedroom, asleep in a massive four-poster bed. Director Vera looked almost peaceful in the dim light, his face relaxed, a faint smile playing on his lips. But I knew better. This man was a monster, a puppet master who controlled the emotions of an entire city. I pressed the knife to his throat and his eyes snapped open. For a moment, he looked confused, then terrified. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "Where is it?" I hissed, my voice low and dangerous. "The Euphora. I know you have more." He hesitated, his eyes darting to a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. I dragged him out of bed and forced him to open it. Inside were dozens of vials, each one filled with the same amber liquid that had become my lifeline. I filled a syringe with a double dose and injected it without hesitation. The rush was immediate, overwhelming. I felt invincible, like nothing could touch me. But as I turned to leave, I saw the glint of metal in Vera's hand. The first bullet hit me in the stomach, the second in the chest. But I felt no pain. Instead, a strange warmth spread through my body, like the embrace of a long-lost friend. I laughed, the sound echoing through the room as I collapsed to the floor. As the darkness closed in, I realized the cruel irony of it all. I had spent my life feeling nothing, and now, in my final moments, I felt everything. The joy, the fear, the love, the regret. It all washed over me in a flood of sensation. And then, nothing. Elena found me the next morning, my body cold and lifeless, a smile still etched on my face. She never touched Euphora again. But sometimes in the quiet moments before dawn, she would open the vial she had hidden away and hold it up to the light, watching the amber liquid swirl like liquid fire. And she would wonder if it was worth it. The cave exploring experience. I never understood my sister's obsession with caves. To me, they were nothing more than gaping maws in the earth, waiting to swallow the unwary whole. The thought of squeezing through narrow, damp passages surrounded by tons of rock made my skin crawl. But for Clara, it was a calling. She'd always been drawn to the unknown, the hidden, the forbidden. And now, after her latest expedition, I wished more than ever that she'd chosen a safer hobby. Clara had always been the adventurous one. While I preferred the comfort of open skies and solid ground, she thrived in the darkness. She'd often try to convince me to join her, her eyes gleaming with excitement as she described the thrill of exploration. "When you're down there, Lila," she'd say, her voice low and reverent, "you become something else. The earth speaks to you. It's alive, and it remembers. You can feel it in the walls, in the air. It's like stepping into another world. I'd always shut her down. It's not another world, Clara. It's a death trap. One wrong move, and you're buried alive. No thanks. But she never listened. She'd just laugh and shake her head, as if I were the one who didn't understand. And maybe I didn't. Maybe that's why, when she returned from her latest trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It started with the silence. Clara had been gone for 3 days, exploring a newly discovered cave system in the northern mountains. She'd sent me updates at first, photos of the cave entrance, texts about the formations she'd found. But then, nothing. I told myself it was just the lack of signal, that she'd emerge eventually, grinning and covered in mud, as she always did. But as the hours turned into days, a gnawing unease settled in my chest. When she finally returned, it was in the dead of night. I heard the front door creak open, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps dragging across the floor. I rushed to the hallway, my heart pounding, and there she was. But she wasn't the Clara I knew. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks hollow, as if she hadn't eaten in days. Her clothes were caked in dried mud, and a faint, sickly smell clung to her. A mix of damp earth and something else, something rotten. Her eyes were wide and darting, never settling on one thing for too long. She didn't speak, not at first. She just stood there, swaying slightly, her hands twitching at her sides. "Clara?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed past me and began pacing the house, opening drawers and cabinets, slamming doors shut. I followed her, my unease growing with every step. "Clara, what are you looking for? Talk to me." She ignored me, her movements frantic and erratic. Finally, she stopped in the middle of the hallway and turned to face me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something in them, something dark and unfamiliar. "It's different down there," she said, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "What's different?" I asked, my stomach churning. She didn't answer. Instead, she began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't a laugh of joy or amusement. It was the laugh of someone who had seen something they couldn't unsee. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, replaying Clara's strange behavior over and over. I tried to convince myself that she was just exhausted, that she'd been spooked by something in the cave and needed time to recover. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise from the hallway. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and peered through the crack in my door. The hallway was dark, but I could just make out the shape of the tall white lamp that stood near the stairs. Except, it wasn't there. The space where it should have been was empty. I crept out of bed and opened the door wider, my pulse quickening. The lamp was still in its usual place, but something about it felt off. It was too tall, too still. And then I realized it wasn't the lamp at all. It was something else, something that had been standing there, watching me. I turned to Clara's room, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Her door was closed, but I could feel her presence on the other side. I knocked softly. "Clara, are you awake?" There was no answer. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the bed, her back to me. She was hunched over, her shoulders shaking, and for a moment I thought she was crying. But then she turned to face me, and I saw the grin on her face, a wide, unnatural smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You need to come with me, Leila," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Where?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Down there," she whispered. "You need to see it. You need to crawl under the earth." My chest tightened and I took a step back. "Clara, stop. You're scaring me." She stood up suddenly, her movements jerky and unnatural. She crossed the room in a few quick strides and grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I've seen it. I've seen what's waiting for us, and you won't make it there unless you come with me." I pulled away from her, my heart racing. "Clara, you're not making any sense. What did you see?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked to the window, pulling the curtains shut with a sharp tug. "It's okay," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You'll see soon enough." The next morning, Clara was gone. Her room was empty, the bed neatly made as if she'd never been there. I searched the house, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. And then I saw it, a note on the kitchen table, written in her shaky handwriting. "I've gone back. Don't follow me. You won't make it there." I crumpled the note in my hand, my mind racing. What had she seen in that cave? What had driven her to go back? I knew I had to find her, but the thought of venturing into the darkness filled me with dread. As I stood there, staring at the crumpled note, a sound caught my attention, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming against glass. I turned to the window and froze. Outside, in the dim light of dawn, I saw it. A figure hunched and shadowy standing at the edge of the yard. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes, if it had eyes, were fixed on me. I blinked and it was gone. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a cold weight pressing down on my chest. And as I stood there trembling, I realized that Clara had been right about one thing. The earth remembers, and it's hungry. The Happy Meal customer. I never thought I'd end up working at a fast food joint. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and when my husband's salary couldn't cover our mounting bills, student loans, credit card debt, and the endless expenses of raising a child, I had no choice. So there I was, clocking in at the McDonald's near our neighborhood, wearing a uniform that felt like a costume, serving fries to strangers while my 6-year-old son, Ethan, waited at home with a babysitter. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And for the most part, it was uneventful. That is, until I met him. The regular. The one who made my skin crawl, even before I knew why. His name was Daniel. He was in his mid-30s, always impeccably dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. He had this air of exhaustion about him, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Every Friday evening, like clockwork, he'd walk in, order a Big Mac and a Happy Meal to go, and make small talk while he waited. Polite, but distant. Always distant. At first, I didn't think much of him. He was just another customer, another face in the crowd. But over time, I started to notice little things. The way he'd glance around the restaurant, like he was checking to see if anyone was watching him. The way his hands would tremble slightly when he handed me his cash. And then there was the Happy Meal. One Friday, curiosity got the better of me. "You always order a Happy Meal," I said, trying to sound casual as I handed him his bag. "Do you have kids?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, a little girl. She's the light of my life. I bring this home for her every Friday. It's our tradition." I nodded, smiling back. "That's sweet. I have a son at home. He's 6. I wish he could stay little forever." Daniel's smile widened, but there was something off about it. Something that made my stomach twist. "I know what you mean," he said, his voice low. "I wish my little girl could stay sweet and young forever, too." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just handed him his receipt and watched as he walked out the door, the Happy Meal bag swinging from his hand. Daniel stopped coming in about 2 weeks before I quit my job. I didn't think much of it at the time. People's routines change. Maybe he'd found a new place to eat, or maybe he'd moved. I was too busy juggling work and family to give it much thought. But then one night, everything changed. My husband, Mark, came home late. I heard the front door open and close quietly, followed by the sound of his footsteps in the kitchen. I put down my book and went to see him, careful not to wake Ethan as I passed his room. Mark was standing in front of the open refrigerator, staring at something inside. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched into fists. I approached him slowly, placing a hand on his back. "Hey," I said softly, "you okay?" He jumped, startled, then turned to me with a look I'll never forget. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "Just long day." I didn't press him. Instead, I helped him heat up some leftovers and sat with him at the table while he ate. But something was wrong. He was quiet, too quiet, and every bite he took seemed to take effort, like he was forcing himself to swallow. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Mark," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "What happened today?" He looked at me for a long moment, then set his fork down and rubbed a hand over his face. "I don't know if I should tell you," he said, his voice breaking. It's bad, Sarah. Really bad." "You can tell me," I said, squeezing his hand. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it together." He took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. "We got a call today," he began, his voice trembling. "A disturbance at a house a few blocks from here. A neighbor heard screaming and called it in. When we got there, a man answered the door. He was agitated, nervous. He tried to get us to leave, but then we heard it, a scream, from inside the house. My stomach dropped. What happened? Mark's eyes filled with tears. He pulled a gun. We had no choice but to draw ours. We told him to put it down, but he put it to his head and pulled the trigger. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "Oh my God, Mark." "That's not even the worst part," he said, his voice cracking. "When we went inside, we found her. A little girl. She was tied up in a room, Sarah. A room with no windows, no light. She'd been there for months, and the floor was covered in Happy Meal boxes." My blood ran cold. "Happy Meal boxes?" He nodded, his face pale. "Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And the girl, she was so thin, so scared. She kept saying, 'He told me I was his little girl. He told me I'd never grow up.'" I felt like I was going to be sick. "Mark, the man, what did he look like?" He hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was a mugshot taken after the man had been arrested for something minor years ago. But there was no mistaking him. It was Daniel. I quit my job at McDonald's the next day. I couldn't bear to be there anymore, not after what Mark had told me. Not after knowing that Daniel, the man who'd smiled at me and talked about his little girl, had been a monster. But the story doesn't end there. A few days later, I was cleaning out Ethan's room when I found something under his bed. A Happy Meal box, the kind Daniel used to order. My heart stopped. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a note, written in a child's messy handwriting. "Thank you for the toy. I'll be your little girl forever." I dropped the box like it was on fire and backed away, my heart pounding. And then I heard it, a faint, high-pitched giggle coming from somewhere in the house. I never found the source of that laughter. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. And I wonder if Daniel's little girl ever really left. The paralyzed boss. The office was always quiet after hours, but that evening the silence felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like restless spirits. I sat at my desk, staring at the bouquet of roses that had arrived earlier. The card read, "To Grace, from your secret admirer." The scent of the flowers was cloying, almost suffocating, and the crimson petals looked too vivid, too alive, like they were bleeding color onto the pristine white desk. I knew who they were from. It wasn't hard to figure out. My boss, Mr. Grayson, had been dropping hints for weeks. Lingering glances, unnecessary compliments, and those after-hours meetings that always seemed to stretch longer than they should. He was married, with 3 children, and old enough to be my father. The thought of his interest in me made my skin crawl, but I had no choice. I needed this job. The first meeting had been innocent enough, or so I thought. He'd asked me to stay late to review a presentation. But then came the questions. "So, are you single?" he'd asked, his voice casual, as if he were commenting on the weather. I'd pretended not to hear him, focusing instead on the slides in front of me. But the tension in the room had been palpable, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The real turning point came during a team meeting. 12 of us sat around the large conference table, and Mr. Grayson chose the seat right next to mine. As the presentation droned on, I felt something brush against my thigh under the table. At first, I thought it was an accident, but then his hand settled there, warm and heavy. My breath hitched, and I froze, my mind racing. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, though they were all focused on the screen. I stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and fled the room. That afternoon, a message popped up on my corporate chat. "Please stay after 7 so we can discuss the Q2 sales strategy in private." My stomach churned, but I replied with a simple, "Of course." When the clock struck 7, the office was empty, the silence broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. I knocked on Mr. Grayson's door, and his voice called out, "Come in." He was seated behind his desk, his tie loosened, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He motioned for me to sit, and I did, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "You've been showing great potential," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "If you play your cards right, you'll have a future here." I forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I really enjoy working here." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with a predatory gaze. "The only thing you're missing," he said, his tone dropping lower, is being a team player. There are bigger positions coming up. Maybe you'll get lucky. I knew what he meant. The air in the room felt thicker, harder to breathe. I needed to buy time. How about a beer? I asked, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. His face lit up and he gestured to the mini fridge in the corner. That's what I'm talking about. Help yourself. I walked to the fridge, my heels clicking softly against the floor. I opened 2 bottles, handing one to him. He raised his in a toast. To a stunning woman, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. We sipped in silence for a moment, the tension between us growing heavier. Then he leaned in, his breath hot against my face. But before he could close the distance, his body stiffened. His eyes widened in shock, and he collapsed to the floor, his limbs twitching uncontrollably. He was paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly, his eyes filled with terror. I knelt beside him, checking his pulse. It was steady, but he was completely immobilized. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Mrs. Grayson stepped inside. She was a tall, elegant woman, her face a mask of cold fury. She looked down at her husband, her lips curling in disgust. I had my suspicions he was a bastard, she said, her voice icy. But you finally proved it. Thank you, Grace. She handed me an envelope, thick with cash. I took it, nodding my thanks. Before I left, I turned to her. Did you bring the equipment? She reached into her coat and pulled out a sharp, gleaming knife. The blade caught the light, reflecting a sliver of the overhead fluorescence. I did, she said. And I remember the directives you sent, how to stop the bleeding when removing limbs. I nodded, satisfied. Good. He won't be able to scream, but it's best to work quickly. As I walked out of the office, the envelope tucked safely in my bag, I felt a strange sense of calm. The silence of the empty hallway was no longer oppressive. It was comforting, like the quiet after a storm. There are easier ways for a woman to make money, but none as satisfying as this. Justice, after all, is best served cold and silent. Worst house cleaner's nightmare. I was desperate. My car had broken down, and the repair bill was more than I could afford. I'd been scraping by on odd jobs, but nothing steady had come my way in weeks. So when an elderly man named Mr. Grayson offered to pay me generously to clean his house, I swallowed my reservations and agreed. He'd been kind enough to give me a ride home after my car died, and though something about him made my skin crawl, I convinced myself I was overthinking it. After all, I needed the money. The morning of the job, Mr. Grayson picked me up from my apartment. His car was an old rusted sedan that smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic. He didn't say much during the drive, just hummed softly to himself, his gnarled hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I tried to make small talk, but his responses were curt, almost dismissive. By the time we pulled up to his house, my unease had grown into a knot of dread in my stomach. The house was a crumbling Victorian on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown hedges and a lawn that hadn't seen a mower in years. The paint was peeling, and the windows were dark like empty eyes staring out at the world. Mr. Grayson led me to the front door, his movements slow and deliberate, and ushered me inside with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The interior was worse than I could have imagined. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, and the walls were cluttered with strange artifacts, old photographs, rusted tools, and what looked like animal bones mounted on plaques. The furniture was heavy and outdated, draped in yellowed sheets that did little to hide the stains beneath. And then there were the pictures, dozens of them, hanging crookedly on the walls. Most were of nude women, their faces blurred or scratched out, but a few were of Mr. Grayson himself, much younger, standing beside people I didn't recognize. "You'll start in the living room," he said, his voice raspy. "I'll be in the study if you need me." I nodded, clutching my cleaning supplies like a lifeline, and got to work. The sooner I finished, the sooner I could leave. But as I dusted and scrubbed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains made my heart skip a beat. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I found it. In the corner of the living room, tucked beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers, was a pair of my underwear. My stomach churned as I picked them up, my hands trembling. How had they gotten here? And then it hit me. Mr. Grayson had asked to use the bathroom when he dropped me off at my apartment a few days ago. He must have taken them then. My mind raced as I shoved them into my coat pocket, along with a small, leather-bound diary I found nearby. The diary was mine too, filled with pages of my private thoughts. I felt violated, exposed, and more than a little afraid. I tried to keep working, to focus on the task at hand, but Mr. Grayson's presence loomed over me like a shadow. He appeared out of nowhere, standing too close, his breath hot on my neck as he made comments that made my skin crawl. "You're doing a fine job," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Such a pretty girl. You remind me of someone I used to know." I forced a smile and edged away, but he followed me from room to room, his eyes never leaving me. His touches became more frequent, a hand on my shoulder, a brush against my arm, and each one made my stomach turn. I wanted to leave, to run out the door and never look back, but I was trapped. My car was still in the shop, and I had no way to get home unless he drove me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped the rag I'd been using to clean and turned to face him. "I think I'm done for the day," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll come back tomorrow to finish." He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped closer, his smile widening into something grotesque. "Oh, but we're just getting started," he said, his voice low and menacing. Before I could react, he lunged at me, pinning me against the wall with surprising strength for a man his age. His hands groped at me, his breath hot and foul against my face. I struggled, kicking and clawing, but he was relentless. Somehow I managed to break free. I stumbled toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest, but he was right behind me. I heard the sound of metal scraping against wood and turned to see him holding an axe, its blade gleaming in the dim light. His eyes were wild, his grin feral as he advanced on me. I screamed and bolted for the door, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. I didn't look back, didn't stop to see if he was following me. I just ran, tears streaming down my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The sound of his footsteps echoed behind me, growing fainter as I reached the street and kept going. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station miles away. I collapsed against the wall, my body trembling, and called the police. They took my statement, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Grayson was a respected member of the community, they said. He wouldn't do something like that. I never went back to that house. I never told anyone else what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear his footsteps outside my window. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for me.